You're listening to Trailblazers.fm, an interview-styled podcast that delves deep into bold conversations with successful Black entrepreneurs and leaders. Join us weekly to learn actionable strategies, valuable tactics, and innovative tools that you can put to use immediately on your journey to blazing your trail. And now, here's your host, my husband, Stephen A. Hart.
Blaze Nation, good morning. Thank you so much for joining us. I am so excited to be back here for another Wednesday takeover by my dear brother, Mr. Shawn Dove. Shawn, good morning.
Good morning, Stephen. Oh, I love, when we first started this, I used to get this long introduction. You used to build me up for the intro and the drum roll, and now it is here's Shawn Dove. And
here's Shawn Dove.
So
partner in crime.
Even more at home on the platform, and a good morning, brother. And excited for today's show. And once again, just thank you for sharing the Trailblazers platform with me on the Wednesday takeovers. And we got two amazing sisters, Black women, friends, colleagues, partners, prayer partners that will be joining us today. But before we go another step further, I want to shout out another Black woman, your wife, Kristen Hart, right? Every time I hear the intro, and when I hear her say, now, here's Stephen Hart, my husband, and she now, I don't know whose idea that was, but that would be a good one. So welcome to your audience and to our audience. And I want to invite folks to put a word in for today. My word, and we were just talking about this, is I had two words. My first word was risk. But in our conversation before coming on air, we were talking about trust. So I had a hyphenated word of risk / or hyphen trust. Let me reverse that. Trust first and then risk, right? And so welcome Judy Touzin and Dr. Pamela Jolly. We're going to dive in because folks have tuned in to hear you and not me. I'm going to let you guys introduce yourselves, and we are going to start first with Judy Touzin, and just quickly let the Trailblazer audience know, who is Judy Touzin, what are you up to, and who blazed a trail for you in order to be here today?
Well, first, yes.
Pamela already thinking about that. Go ahead, Judy.
Well, first, just thank you. Thank you again, Blazer Nation, Shawn, Stephen. It is a privilege and an honor to be with you guys this morning. I'm Judy Touzin. I am the founder and lead organizer of the Exceptional Project. But even beyond that, I'm just a daughter, a sister, a friend. I came into this work as an educator, started in New York City, New York as an elementary school teacher up in Harlem. And that is where I fell in love with the work of changing the narrative around Black boys and young men. I think of my former students, Joshua and Jordan and Amir and so many who shared their beauty and their genius with me. And so for the past several years, I've been working on the Exceptional Project, which exists to amplify the beauty, the brilliance, and the humanity of Black men and boys across the country. I think of my mom who left Haiti and came to this country in hopes of a better land of opportunity for her kids. I think of all the teachers that I've had who poured into me and told me that I was brilliant. And so I became brilliant, not sure if I was just because they just spoke it over me so much. And so when I think about the work, I try to do the very same thing for all the young men that I'm blessed to work with. And I tell Shawn all the time, between him and Ron Walker and others in the Black male achievement space, I stand on your shoulders. I do this work alongside you and live and long for the day where our Black boys and young men are seen for the beautiful geniuses that they are. So thank you again.
Wow, thank you. Pamela, Dr. Jolly.
Wow. Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much, Shawn Dove and Stephen and Blazer Nation. Hello, good morning. Welcome at 8 o'clock in the morning. I'm Dr. Pamela Jolly. I'm CEO of Torch Enterprises. Torch stands for passing the torch from one generation to the next to build legacy wealth with ownership and equity in our communities. And so for 17 years, I've been raising that torch and carrying it across the country. My dissertation was the convergence of the faith and finance in the African American community. After interviewing thousands of African Americans about their relationship with money and how they defined wealth, I created a methodology called the Narrow Road. And so I've spoken across the country about the Narrow Road. I've sold thousands of books about it. I have a second edition that's out now. But I was blessed to meet Shawn Dove years ago, and we had a conversation, and I was so excited about what Shawn was doing for the lives of Black men and boys, and I was honored that he invited me to join that journey with him. And so I was blessed to be able to create with Shawn the Black Male Equity Initiative. And so I interviewed over 3,900 African American men across the country and found that men have a different relationship with money than women, especially Black men. And it's important that we put a business model around it. It's important that you know your equity. It's important that you learn how to invest it. So I'm really grateful to be here. I'm grateful to be a part of this narrative. I'm grateful to work alongside Shawn and Stephen and Travian Shorters and Anthony Smith and so many other Black men that are in Willie Barney, because it's just a beautiful thing to be in alignment with Black men in the pursuit of wealth their way.
Wow. Welcome, sisters Judy and Pamela. And I'm so glad, Pamela, you talked about being in alignment and working with Black men in this movement for Black men and boys, improving the life outcomes of Black men and boys, and having, and both of you are publishers and are focused on asset-based framing of just who we are and our beauty. You know, sometimes in this space, when you raise a flag for one thing, people want to jump to the conclusion that you're against something else, right? Mm-hmm. And just because we raise a flag for Black men and boys, that does not mean that we also cannot center Black women and that we are working alongside and in alignment with Black women in this movement. And, you know, we had the headline for this session, the indispensable ingredient of Black woman to the Black male achievement movement. You both are published in many respects. I want to lift up, Pamela talked about the Black Male Equity Initiative, and this is a book that we partnered on and we published, Detroit Reclaiming the Dream. And we're going to come to you, Judy, in the exceptional project after, but I'm going to ask Pamela just to tease out and thread some more about just the role and the indispensable ingredient of Black women and how the Black Male Equity Initiative, the seeds that you have sown, where are we going to blossom next with that?
Wow. So very loaded question. So just for those of you who aren't from Detroit, and we were blessed to work with some amazing Black men in Detroit for over a year. And we looked at equity through 4 different perspectives: your cultural equity, your intellectual equity, your human equity, and then your social equity. And we really asked men to define wealth their way. We looked at those lenses of equity through our Black history. And Detroit has a wonderful Black male narrative in the leadership of the city and beyond. And so what we found through that journey, Shawn, and please weigh in, is that, you know, wealth is nothing new in America, but for too many of us, it's uncharted territory. And so the Black men in Detroit worked with us through this narrow road method to navigate their road to wealth, to define it for themselves. What I've been blessed to do after with the Detroit, and we wrote the book, the number of people, Shawn, that reach out to me because they've read the anthology, because they're excited about doing things like that. I've been thinking about and praying about what could be a larger rollout. So I'm looking forward to working with you in that. Since then, I've done cohorts and intensives with men across the country. What's coming next is I'm the Wealth Finishing School and partnering with Shawn to figure out what we can do with Black men so that you can finish the unfinished business about that asset called you and make sure that it builds wealth according to your values and your principles.
And I firmly believe that's the next wave of this work. Stephen and I were having an exchange with Gary Cunningham from Prosperity Now, and talking about the racial wealth gap. But what I love about your framing is defining wealth our way, and not comparing. And the beauty of the Black Male Equity Initiative, having brothers work together and being side by side and in a room and in a space where to the left of me, someone that is formerly incarcerated and figuring out how they're getting back on their feet and their money picture, but also someone to the right of me that is doing estate planning and have properties and how we can work together for that, right? And we're gonna come back to that, but wanted to lift up also another book, and this is Judy's book, The Exceptional Project, and it's exceptional Black men leading, living, and loving, right? And when we talk about indispensable ingredients to the movement, Judy, this has, I gotta get used to centering this right here on the screen. Judy, this has been an indispensable ingredient, not only as a book, but as a framework and a mindset. And let's just tell us about that.
100%. So thank you again. The Exceptional Project, I started that back in 2016, largely in response to the killing of Mike Brown, and the way that the image and the story was being told, right? The choice to use what looked like a mugshot over his graduation picture, and the idea that, like, since the birth of a nation in 1915, mass media has been used to perpetuate the image and the narrative of Black men and boys as dangerous and deviant, to be feared and contained, as opposed to be acknowledged and uplifted. And so I saw it firsthand teaching elementary school, asking students, when you think of Black, what are the first things that come to mind for you? And you think of white, what are the first things that come to mind to you? And they were 8, and they said dirty and poor and funny was maybe the most kind of like maybe affirming ascription that they could think of for themselves. And so in my mind, if this is what you're thinking about yourself and what you identify with at 8, it's going to be very hard for you to feel like there's a different possibility for you on the back end of that. And so the Exceptional Project really got started as a way to uplift the stories of not necessarily celebrities or famous people, but everyday Black men in our communities who are leading, living, and loving in powerful ways. So that we might be able to, instead of immediately thinking a felon or a criminal, we might think of a father, a chef, right? A brother, somebody who is loved, somebody who's adding value to the world. And it's the Exceptional Project because of the idea that exceptional doesn't mean like you're the only one, you're the standout, right? We love to hold up the one that's like, oh, he's the shining example of what it could be to be a Black man. But I think of exceptional as the fact that we're all unique. We're all rare. We all have value. No Black man is replaceable in the life of the family that he's been born into, or the gifts that he's been given to share with the world. And if we could acknowledge our Black men and boys as the exceptional beings they are, then it wouldn't be so easy to move on and not really labor long at the table of figuring out how to change some of the life outcomes that they face. And I think of even Dr. Jolly's work. It's really important. It's really hard to see yourself as a wealthy being or someone who has the potential and is deserving of creating wealth if the story you tell yourself isn't one of affirmation or that you were a king before you were a slave. And so it's really about narrative change work, helping boys and men to redefine themselves so that they can redefine their possibilities and walk in the greatness and the genius that God gave them.
So much there. And just wanted to lift up and thank you, Judy, for lifting up your Haitian roots. And we're talking about narrative change. And what I love about Stephen and Trailblazers podcast, he is manifesting one of my mission mantras, that we have to become masters of our own media. And when we go back to our Haitian brothers and sisters and what we are seeing at the border, and our ability as being voices for each other and speaking and having platforms and telling our stories and taking risks to do that. And I am just seeing so much, and the comparison in our policy as a country and how we are treating others versus our Haitian brothers and sisters. That just resonated when you brought that up. I want to shout out Brother Steve Vassar and Didier Sylvain and others that have lifted up, from Haitian heritage that I wanted to lift up. And, I mentioned Didier Sylvain, and you all may know him, but he is a life coach and healer. And he had this post yesterday. He talked about what he wanted to be known for. And rattled off. He doesn't rattle. He speaks in a very methodical, slow way, right? But I thought that was a really interesting, reflective question. And we're going to stay with you, Judy, right? And the work that you are doing, your mission and your calling. What do you want to be known for?
That's such a powerful and big question. Honestly, I think I want to be known for having given more than I took in this world, for having always spoken from a spirit of love and peace and hope and faith, that when others saw themselves through my eyes, they saw God's gift to the world, independent of what state they're in, right? Like I'll often say to people, I've learned just as much from somebody struggling with alcoholism and living on the street as I have of some of my professors in Harvard, right? And so for the person who is on the street to see me see them through the eyes of their genius in the same way is what I would want to be known for.
Great. And before we go to you, Dr. Jolly, thank you for leading with wanting to be known for giving. Right. And generosity. That's something I want to be known for. Right. And just this morning in my journaling, and that's part of my morning mission fuel. And for the trailblazers out there, if you don't have a morning practice, a ritual of devotionals, I encourage you to do so. I encourage you to get your own mission fuel journal. Right. But I wrote this morning because Pamela knows and Stephen knows also that I grapple with clarity, right? And the question that is so hard, what do you want, right? And answering that question. And it was funny, this morning I was doing some journaling and I wrote, perhaps I should focus less on what I want and more on what I want to give and what I want to contribute to the world, right? And so I'm like, Judy like spying real time and on my journal writing, right? And so Dr. Pamela Jolly, you have been so prolific. Tell us in the Trailblazer audience, what do you want to be known for?
So I want to leave this world better than I found it. I truly believe I inherited this journey. So I've picked up the torch from so many before us. And the goal that I'm focusing on, I want wealth to be a standard in our community. I want every person of color, every Black person to know that we are unique in America. We're the only people who were first capital before we ever made capital. So we are wealth. So it's not an outside thing, it's an inside thing that can become even bigger on the outside. So I really want wealth to be a standard in our community. I want to leave this world the way I found it, better than I found it. But I want to make sure that people understand that I picked up a torch and I'm moving it forward. This is nothing new. It's a continuation of a dream that we've all inherited the opportunity to pursue and take forward further.
Thanks for that. And I want to shout out our brother Kelly Little, who had put in the chat. His word for today is a harmony. And harmony, balance is another word. Today is the fall equinox, right? And first day of fall, and one of the 2 days of the year in the Western Hemisphere where there's equal daylight and night. And so that harmony that Kelly Little lifts up, and Pamela just made me think about, it's an inside job, right? That we have to have harmony and peace within. And the wealth is also inside of us. And, Stephen and I, before you all jumped on, we were just checking in, and I had shared with him. He asked me how I was doing. And I said, I got a lot going on. But one of my beliefs is that no matter how overwhelmed I may feel, I am never overmatched with God in my corner, right? Overwhelmed, but never overmatched. And then Pamela and Judy jumped in, and we had like a devotion, right? I wish our pre-game, pre-show session, folks would have benefited from that, right? And so,
I do want Pamela, if we could, Dr. Jolly, if you could share that devotional, because that was moving. I was like, time out. Let's get to the live. This is too juicy.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I want to give credit to where it is. I'm really grateful. This is a devotional. A client of mine gave it to me, and I read it every day. It's called Jesus Calling by Sarah Young, and it's an amazing devotional. But today was talking about trust me and refuse to worry. So think about how important that is. And, as a theologian, I want to say, everyone has a faith tradition. And what I found is that everyone in some way closes their eyes and believes in something. And so trust it. Trust that inner voice. Trust what's guiding you. Trust that you were born for such a time as this, and trust that you can move forward. But it says that, for I am your strength and song. You may be feeling wobbly this morning, lacking a difficult time, looming ahead and measuring them against your own strength. However, they are not today's tasks. So let's just stay in the present and focus on today, or even tomorrow's. So leave them in the future and come home to the present, where you will find me waiting for you, since I am your strength. And so if you don't have a belief system, I encourage you to build one, because I have found that faith is a currency that gap fills anything you can't afford by yourself. And so I really know that my faith is the strength that I rely on. And in times like these, where there are a lot of uncertain challenges for Black men, for Black women, for Black communities, and for people in general, trust it. And as Shawn was saying, risk, listen, take the risk to trust something outside yourself.
Listen, I'm hearing you say it the second time, and I'm fighting back like teary eyes, because, the last year, it was almost a year ago this time going into October, where I had one of my first anxiety attacks, driving back from Florida, and literally felt my chest just tightening up. And that was the result of me focusing on a future what if scenario that didn't exist. And oftentimes it's the worst possible scenario that we are projecting. And I didn't know what it was, right? And so when you were sharing that, I'd said to you that I was thinking of Matthew 6, 25 to 34, because I had to read Matthew 6, 25 to 34 and Philippians 4, 6 through 8 repeatedly, day after day, to bring myself back to the present so often, to be able to weather that storm, to speak to my therapist and understand that was what anxiety was. And that if I could just simply bring myself to the present, anxiety and being in the present doesn't exist together, right? So thank you so much for sharing that. And that spoke to my heart, the second time around, even more than it did when you did before we started recording.
No, you're most welcome. I think that's the beautiful thing, to talk to the theme of this, the importance of, the indispensable woman and man in this movement. We infill each other. We support each other. I'm so grateful for my relationship with both of you. And Shawn, you're my bigger brother, right? And so I'm grateful for the role you play in my life, and I'm grateful for the role I can play in yours. And so that's really, for me, what it's about, that we are in this together.
And that is so important. And it's obviously a cliche that says we're better together. It's true, and that's why it's a cliche. And Stephen, thanks for your vulnerability and sharing about your anxiety attack, because our strength is in our vulnerability, and especially as Black men, right? And I think one upside of the pandemic, I have seen more Black men raise their hand and say that I need help. And what you just brought to mind, Stephen, and sharing, that anxiety attack and thinking about the past, focusing on the future. This is National Suicide Prevention. And we all know, and in fact, Pamela and I were doing some work together, and there's still some work to be done of just a number of Black men that even get to middle life and just give up, right? And faith is something, you better have it before you need it, right? It's like a car insurance, right? I got 4 children with cars, right? And thank God for car insurance, right? But faith is something that we have to have before we need it, right? And I just wanted to say a word to someone in the audience, right? And I tell the story. Both Pamela and Judy are contributors to my book, I Too Am America, and we're going to turn to their mini manifestos in a second. But I tell a story in my book, in this chapter, Braving My Wilderness, when, the summer of 1989, I had it all plotted and planned out when I was going to jump on the tracks, Penn Station and 34th Street, because I didn't have any hope for the future. And I was going to end my life. But God intervened, and he used people to do that and said, I have a plan for you, Shawn, right? And instead of jumping on those tracks and grabbing the third rail, I got on the train and went into drug rehab, went uptown on the C train, went into, and I think about, God, what would not have been birth if I made that decision, right? And my wife and 4 children, knowing you all and the work that I have been able to do with the movement, right? And so I just want to let somebody that's going to hear this to say, ask for help, reach out, and find something to believe on, not in your past, right? Don't make a decision based on your past. Make a decision based on where you are now and the hope for the future and the belief. And so this is what I love about Trailblazers, that we go. Ralston Samuel says, Judy, Dr. Jolly, thank you for your work, wisdom, and building on the legacy of our great ancestors. All right, I was going to go somewhere else, but I'm going to speak to what Brother Ralston said. So later this afternoon, here's another book. This is, I love Zoom. I can reach in. So this afternoon, I have the opportunity to moderate a discussion with Nadaba Mandela, Going to the Mountain, life lessons from my grandfather, Nelson Mandela. And one of the things he lifts up in the book is, what are the stories, values, ancestors, dreams we need to remember? What are the stories, values, ancestors, dreams we need to remember? And Judy, I'm going to go to you with that question. When you hear that from Nadaba Mandela, what are the stories, values, ancestors, dreams we need to remember? What comes to mind for you?
Honestly, I got to go back to my grandmother. She lived in Haiti all my life, right? And so having been born here, I didn't travel there much. But I remember the couple of times she came to the States and looked at my mom, right? So when I think about generations and legacy and vision and dream, I can only hold back to my grandmother's vision and sacrifice. It was worth it to her to pour her whole soul into getting my mom and my aunt to the States, right? Never having been here herself, she believed in the lore of what America could be, what America should be, the rhetoric America kind of puts out there in the world about itself. And so then sitting here, I know I'm her wildest dream. You know what I mean? Being in this conversation with you, holding on to where my family comes from, their faith in God, their faith in themselves, their faith in something bigger than their current circumstance, is what I hold on to for myself. I'm the middle of 7. I have 12 nieces and nephews. There's a whole lot of us. We're in different states of life, right? But I hold on to there is something bigger and greater beyond all of us if we will give ourselves over to that and live into the things that we were given to do here. And so I walk in that, like it's my strength. I mean, the truth is we all have the same birthmark on our stomach, my grandmother, my mother, and me. So I feel like I'm the one in this generation.
Wow.
To continue to carry that message. I don't have any children of my own, but I believe that in the children that I've served, I get to pour that same faith and belief in what's possible, in the goodness of ourselves, and in our own efforts and the strength that we bring to this world and to the work.
That's powerful. We're going to go to you, Pamela, but I just want to rebuke one thing that you said, Judy. I rebuke the notion that you don't have any children of your own. I have seen so many children touched and blessed by you. You are a mother of the village, and there are thousands of your children from your work and from your leadership that you have sown seeds into, right? And they are your children, right? And so, Dr. Jolly, what are the stories, values, ancestors' dreams we need to remember?
Wow. So two things I'm going to say. One is, and you've heard me say it takes 3 generations to build legacy wealth and only 1 generation to lose it. But when 4 generations stay together, the wealth wheel begins to turn.
Please repeat that. Please.
Yes.
I was hoping you were going to bring this up.
So it takes 3 generations to build legacy wealth and only 1 generation to lose it. But when 4 generations stay together, the wealth wheel begins to turn. And there's 4 generations living right now. So if you can look back to your parents, your grandparents, and your great-grandparents, you have the opportunity to turn the wheel. Now, if you say, well, I don't know my great-grandparents, but I know my grandparents, you're that 3rd generation. You've got to stay connected because only 1 generation it takes to lose it. And so when I think about me, I'm 4th generation Philadelphia. I'm 4th generation entrepreneur. My grandmothers were my first investors in my business. My grandfather was the first man who told me about college when I didn't even know what school was. And so these people planted equity in my spirit to know how to move forward. It's why I have 4 degrees. It's why I move forward. It wasn't just my idea. It was a continuation of a legacy. So that's the first thing I want to say. The second thing I want to say is we are all uniquely tied. You know, the American experiment was about a melting pot. So if we go all the way back, one of my favorite Black leaders is Harriet Tubman. So Harriet Tubman, her first save was a woman by the name of Keziah Jolly, and I'm Pamela Jolly. She migrated up here and realized that freedom wasn't free. Up here 2 blocks away from where I live. And she said that freedom wasn't free without her friends and family. So she ventured back. So as we look forward to be successful, always venture back. And you don't always have to venture back with a check. You can venture back with a word of wisdom, a word of advice, a word of caution, because that's an investment too. And so we all are wealth builders, but we all are inheritors, and we all can leave an inheritance. So I want you to understand that we have a tremendous opportunity to turn the wheel now. We are the gap fillers, and we all can move forward as long as we stay connected.
Wow. I want that to resonate for a moment, and that's why I love the both of you, and so much that you have poured into me personally, right, and poured into the broader network and movement of Black male achievement. And Pamela, you lifted some names of our other brothers, and Judy, what are you working on now? I know that you are in Harvard. And I've been sharing this Arundhati Roy quote for the last year about the pandemic being a portal, a gateway, and an opportunity for us to leave behind what is needs to be left behind. I'm personally passing through this portal moment, and I know that we all are. Talk to us about the portal that you're passing through and what you're working on and what's emerging for you.
Sure. So I think the biggest thing, they say like valley of decision or crossroads. I started the Exceptional Project a few years ago, and I'm really in the stage of figuring out what can it be, right? What does the Black male achievement space really need, as opposed to feeling like I have to create something new to stand out there. I don't believe in redundancy. And I think we are, to your point, we are stronger together. And so I'm really in a place of thinking about, I know my heart and soul is in this work and in this space. Narrative change is a core part of the vision for the Exceptional Project. There's organizations out there that believe in that already, right? The Black Man Can is a social media campaign that really amplifies that. It's an element of the My Brother's Keeper work. And so I'm in a place of trying to figure out, does it stand alone, or actually is this an entrepreneurial work that I bring the same heart and passion to an existing effort? So that's one thing. The other thing, I keep saying I've been bitten by the collective impact bug. Having been in the school system for 18 years, both a teacher, a principal, a coach for aspiring principals, transforming the lives and outcomes with and for Black men and boys is not solely a school endeavor. Right? You actually need schools are a critical part of the work, but they're not the whole. And so thinking about what it is for communities to wrap themselves and their arms and their resources and their time around the agenda for Black men and boys. Again, it's a part of the mission and the vision of My Brother's Keeper. And so really thinking through where does that work live, and where can I best put my hands to the plow for greater impact? So that's what I'm really honestly just grappling and wrestling with now. I'm in a fellowship where I get to explore all those questions. What does it take to work with young men and have them really believe a different story about themselves? And then what does it look like to make sure they're not just able to see a different story, but then they have the supports that they need to actually realize their vision and their dreams? And so we're working on kind of codifying some of those practices, partnering with a school out here in Boston, as well as a school in the Bahamas and potentially a school in Arkansas, to really be able to amplify the stories and the voices of the young men there. And I say amplify intentionally because, again, I'm a Black woman and I love Black men and boys. I understand that their story is not my story to tell, but I can use the spaces that I'm in, the capacity that I have to amplify their story, their voices, and their aspirations. And so those are just some of the things that I'm grappling with, but also currently working on.
Powerful. And I look forward to the invitation to the Bahamas when you go down to do that work, and I can come with you and I'll tell my story. And Dr. Jolly, the portal that you are passing through, and I will also add that, over the last year and going into 2020, we have been talking about the Great Reset, right? And just come with a rich history and cultural capital and intellectual capital. And just curious to hear the portal you're passing through and what's emerging for you.
Yeah, so, the pandemic brought a lot of different opportunities for me to work with people in some research. So I've been doing some really amazing research. We just finished one of the largest national studies of Black women trust in the financial services industry. I'm also doing an econometric model for ways to increase investment in Black-led social and economic change. And then lastly, it's a racial repair fund. So really looking through the book of Nehemiah of ways in which we can pool our capital together and support our communities. I'm excited about launching the Wealth Finishing School in November. And that really is to make wealth local. I'm grateful to have worked in various different communities, but I want to raise the conversation. Let's have some thinking conversations about what wealth as a legacy can really look like and how we can start to make it a standard and put some systems together. And of course, Shawn, I'm looking forward to what we're going to do in the Wealth Finishing School together. So I'm data driven and always so excited to be able to look at the patterns in our information and see what it's telling us. Because as my grandmother would always say, it's hard to see the full picture when we're posing for it. And we're all doing a lot of things, but the patterns of what we're doing really have a message as well.
That's powerful. And where do you need help? Both Judy and Pamela. What's the help you need? And there could be someone listening. We never know, right? Who's listening? Where do you need help?
That's a really great question. When I think about it, you know, being in the pandemic for almost 18 months now, community, right? A connection of people. What I learned is we say the same thing. We say the same words, but we don't mean the same things. Mm-hmm. So people are looking for community to talk about wealth. I'd love to talk with you. I'd love to talk. There's no competition in building wealth as a standard in our community. I'd love to see how we can move this together. And so want to have fellow thought leaders alongside to work with and to commune with. As I've said before, I've always wanted a group of Avengers. Remember, Shawn, who we all are superheroes in our own right, but we come together and we address certain things that impact our community that we know the time has come to change.
So I want to lift up, I'm reaching here because I love just, I'm going to do a podcast when I just reach up and hold books, right? I got to lift up my brother, Jason Wilson, whose new book is out, Battle Cry. Stephen, we got to get him on, Waging and Winning the War Within. And something that you said, Pamela, made me think of Jason, because one of the things that he has been whispering into my ear, and someone else needs to hear this, but you made me think about this, is that as we come through this portal and what the pandemic has made and meant for so many of us, he keeps saying, your unfinished business is not behind you. Your unfinished business is in front of you, right? And I know so much of the narrow road work, the tower view, and looking forward. And I just want to thank you for, yes, the narrow road, for lifting that up. That's so powerful. So I mentioned both Judy and Pamela are contributors to iTunes America on loving and leading Black men and boys. What I love about, so much I love about the book, right? You're talking about a calling, and this is something that I have been dreaming about all my life and have been in the shallow end with writing and publishing. And I said, let me partner with a author, Nick Childs. But what I love about the book, the third section of the book talks about where do we go from here? And it's curated mini manifestos, and blessed to have the two of you contribute mini manifestos. And I want to lift up a quote that you both have contributed in your mini manifestos. I'm going to ask if you can elaborate on that quote. It might be a refresher. You know, be like, God, what did I write? Right? November, you guys, it's coming soon. But Judy said, she asked a question. Right? Yes, Stephen, make sure you put up the pre-order link. All right. Thank you, brother. Judy asked a question: to what extent is the work we are leading aligned to our intention to truly love, affirm, and support Black men and boys? Dr. Judy, can you elaborate on that?
For sure. And that was a real question I was grappling with for myself, right? So I had started doing some work with schools in New York City, connected to their My Brother's Keeper work, working with young men and the educators who are supporting them. And in one of the sessions, we were brainstorming like the topics, right? What do we want to talk about? What should our sessions look like? And I was asked to align our content to an etiquette class, resume writing, not bullying, right? And the language that we saw, all these things, right? And I just couldn't help but think of the ways in which nothing inherently wrong with college going skills and resume building and all the things. But if that's how we're starting the conversation, to what extent are we actually reiterating or implying the message that you experience hardness in America because something is wrong with you, right? If you would dress the part and look the part and speak the part, then all the challenges would disappear. And so the question was one that I had to ask myself, right? In doing the work and leading the work, how do we start the work, right? How do we have the conversations? What do we engage our young men in? And are they experiences and conversations that actually have them critically question the state that they're dealing with, right? Critically question their experiences in America and problematize that, as opposed to continuing to uplift or rareify the notion around respectability politics, right? That actually you just got to do the right thing, walk the right way, pull your pants up. And again, I'm not necessarily saying I'm for or against pants sagging, but I'm saying that if we're really trying to do the work in a way that loves and affirms and uplifts our Black boys and young men, that we can't start and stop the conversation at etiquette and code switching, that we actually need to go a whole lot deeper and help them to, or actually ask them, right? Start with asking them, right? Where do they see themselves? What are their aspirations for themselves? And what are the barriers that are in their way? And how do we help them remove those barriers so that it isn't always about, can you be accepted in someone else's eye, right? If nothing else happens, are we working with young men in a way that helps them to 1,000% accept themselves in their own eyes and then walk in the fullness of that power of self-love and self-acceptance? And so that's where that question kind of came from for me. And what I'm continuing to work towards is, how do the learning experiences, the conversations, the sessions really speak to the beauty, the brilliance, the genius that is inherent in Black boys and young men, that we're not trying to actually have them put something on, we're actually drawing something out.
I look forward to, thank you for that, Judy, and continuing to work with you to manifest where you are going and what you are seeding and unearthing in the work. Thank you for that. And Pamela Jolly, you said this next turn is one that must be co-owned by the many American perspectives who have yet to inherit their seat at the equity table, right? That is from your mini manifesto in my book. Can you elaborate some more on that?
Yeah, so, the key words there are co-ownership. Let's start with co-ownership and then equity table. So co-ownership, right? So ownership is a very independent choice, but co-ownership is a collaboration. It's a partnership. And so when we think about the changes that are happening in America, my father would often say two things that just hold to my heart, because it came out in the research with the Black men. He said, a man can only see as far as he can afford. And so when we think about the billions of dollars that have been allocated to the African-American community, but the actual amount that has been dispersed to date, how far are we looking? How far can we afford to look? Because this is a partnership. There's allocation, but we need disbursement. So this needs to be a partnership. And we've got to co-own the change that our generations have been looking for. And then equity table, sitting at the table, at the equity table means that you are aligned with a shared vision. And there's some blind spots in the American vision when it comes to Black men. And my prayer is that more Black men can sit at that table and share them and be those gap fillers, to learn how to negotiate a blind spot, a place where people don't know to look, perhaps, or don't want to look because they can't look to someone that they can build relationship with. Wealth is a group process. We have to build relationship. So this co-ownership, these perspectives that are missing from our equity table, I believe that the perspectives that are missing are why America can't fulfill her promise. And so let's be those gap fillers, and let's do it from an equitable perspective where we're not just doing it for others. We're not creating wealth, just creating wealth for others. We're also creating wealth for ourselves.
Mm. And I want to stay there because I'll work together, and I know that from your research, one of the barriers, if not the top barrier for wealth building, and specifically your research with Black men, the issue of trust. Right? One, trusting ourselves, but two, trusting each other, right? This came up with the Black Male Equity Initiative in Detroit. And I'm probably misquoting you here, but I remember you saying that there's so many, right? That we don't have a capital problem, right? We don't have a capital problem. We have a collaboration problem or a trust problem, right? I want both you and Judy to take us back to the conversation we were having earlier about trust and how do we build, strengthen, and increase the trust with ourselves and amongst each other.
So two things. In my research, what I found is trust was the number one roadblock that everyone said about why we can't work together and why wealth remains a forward focus and not a now focus. But when you start to data mine, what lies underneath trust is a lack of organization. So set some priorities. You can't trust everybody with everything. But if you have certain priorities, you know who you can trust who with what. And so get some priorities about what you really want, and then use your discerning spirit to determine who you can trust what with what. But the other thing, though, is when we think about trust, you got to trust yourself. What do you really want? And that's what you talked about, Shawn, when you said, instead of focusing so much on what I want, what can I give, I would ask you to expand that a little bit. A lot of people get to what they want by really defining what they don't want first, right? So your no is such a powerful tool because it frees up time and space for you to pursue what really matters.
Woo!
We have so much crowding us. We have so many options, but wealth is a choice. I need you to be clear and have space to make a choice. And so therefore, listen, great. I got options. You got options. We all got options. It's not that I don't care about your options, but what I care more about is your choice. Because if I know that you have chosen something, you're committed. And when you make a commitment, it's a decision. And a decision is an incision. You cut off everything else because this is what I want. As a result, when you can tell me that, it is my job to help you as a partner in your success, which is our success, which means that wealth can become a standard in our community. So that's my prayer for us, that we basically start to narrow our road, sharpen our focus, prioritize what we want so that we can all work together so that we can get it.
And I would just add to this question of like trust, right? I often go back to narrative change, right? Like so many people, right? The kind of saying in like the Black communities, crabs in a barrel, right? Like, and that's just a known cliche about the way things work. And the stories aren't always told about where trusting collaboration paid off, right? And so how do we amplify those stories, those practices, those ways of being together in community, in village that yielded the fruit, the wealth, right? The sustainability and success that we're working towards. And so I feel like if the stories aren't told of how it's been done and had impact in the past, then that only delays the next generation from feeling like it's something that they can also step into. And so the work that you're doing, Dr. Jolly, right? How does that get amplified to the point where it becomes something that people can see for themselves, or they understand the organization that needs to be put in place to actually walk in the fullness of the pursuit of wealth? If that's not done, I don't think we close that gap as fast as we need to.
Yeah, and that's why the work that you're doing, Judy, is so important because, a story, we all have stories, those are circles, but the narrative connects the dots across generations.
100%.
So, what we're doing, the generation before us, the vision has stayed the same, and so in that way, the stagnant position of progress in some ways in our community can be a blessing if we stay focused on that same roadblock, and each generation gets stronger and stronger to be able to overcome it. And so what you're doing in terms of encouraging people to look within and find their stories and connect it to the narrative is so important. So whatever I can do to support, I want to, and I want to get to know you better and think
Yes,
about ways in which we can both work together.
100%. Agreed wholeheartedly.
Yeah.
Wow. And on the whole story and narrative front, for me, during the last 18 months, spending time, and this has to do with the trust and self-trust, and also looking at the story that we tell ourselves, and the narratives in our heads. And for me, one of the biggest things over the last 18 months is shifting from seeking external and extrinsic validation and approval to going inside for intrinsic and internal validation and approval, right? And working on our belief system, working on my belief system and what I want. I'm just so excited about what's in store, and it takes work. One of the things, like, you cannot blaze a trail or be a trailblazer without carving time to cocoon and go within, to prune, right? You got to cocoon and you got to prune, right? There's no growth and there's no fruit without pruning. And what is it that you have to be cut, that has to be cut away in order for you to grow? What is it that has to be left behind in order for you to go forward, right? And that's been some of the reflective questions that I have certainly been grappling with, and writing the book and looking at my story has been an excavation of the soul. And Brene Brown has a quote about owning your story, talking about ownership, right? Owning your story and loving yourself through the process is the bravest thing you will ever do. And I know we're coming up on time. I have on my Rumble Young Man Rumble sweatshirt, and I have been immersed in the PBS documentary the last 3 nights on Muhammad Ali's story, and I'm in the Rumble mood. And Muhammad Ali has a quote, right? And it's actually on my wall behind me. He who is not courageous enough to take risk will accomplish nothing in life. He who is not courageous enough to take risks will accomplish nothing in life. I'm going to ask both Judy and Pamela to respond to that Muhammad Ali quote with a closing word for our trailblazer audience. And I know it's going to resonate with Stephen and I. We'll start with you, Judy.
Okay. Get over the fear of failure, right? Like, failure is feedback. Failure is a lesson teacher. There's no such thing as really losing. There's just learning. And so if fear is what is keeping you, and I'm speaking to myself at the same time, so let's be clear, if fear is what is keeping you from stepping out, taking a chance, walking in the fullness of the vision that you've been given to give to this earth, then my word to you is to get over fear. Take the risk.
You sure you don't have access to my journal?
Only the pictures you share.
Maybe I've shared this because one of the things for me, we're going to go to you, Pamela, on this, the failure. If you or if we can reframe our failure, we can reframe our future. That has been one of the biggest things that I've derived over the last 18 months. Pamela, he who is not courageous enough to take risks will accomplish nothing in life. Muhammad Ali said, what does that mean to you? And what word do you have for our trailblazer audience?
I think what comes to my mind is, it's an age-old quote, whatever you believe, you're right? Mm-hmm. And so take the risk in believing in you by getting really clear about what you believe and move with it. Own it. Like, own what you believe and act in it, and do that every day. Remind yourself what you believe, because your belief drives your actions. And without action, a difference can't be made. So be the difference by believing in you and acting in what your belief. Make that faith without works is dead. Keep that faith alive.
I'm going to be studying this session. I love you both. Thank you for being sisters and of all sorts in this work, and looking forward to the future that we're going to be building together. My Jamaican brethren, Stephen, don't ever feel left out. I love you too.
No, I love my position in these calls. I'm just soaking it all in. And thank you so much, Dr. Jolly and Judy. I appreciate you both being here. I appreciate all that you're doing. I acknowledge you for the work you're doing, and just encourage you to keep pushing, keep rising above, and keep blazing that trail. Everybody go out and pre-order Shawn's book. We shared a link for Judy and Dr. Jolly and Shawn. They're in the feed of comments in our LinkedIn today, and they've been scrolling across the screen. I will close us out today. On Monday, I shared a solo episode talking about Acres of Diamonds. It's a story that, you know, I'm always drawn back to, and I've shared several times on the podcast. But on Monday, this particular quote here spoke to me when Shawn talked about pruning and the need for pruning. And I think along that line, I'll expand on that and just say, you know, we need to keep, like the Chinese bamboo tree, we also have to just keep watering and be patient at times. Right? And this quote spoke to me. To my mind, there are few things more pitiful than a person who wastes his life running from one thing to another, forever looking for the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, and never staying with one thing long enough to find it. Right? So let's keep watering that soil. Right, Shawn? Jump on that one, brother.
That one thing, right? And focus, right? I'm going to just end. I thought you were ending, but thank you for throwing it to me. And just in closing, the focus, and I think certainly Pamela lifted this up with the narrow road, and you know, what I'm working on is being less of a strobe light and being more of a laser beam. One of my mantras and frameworks is FIT, right? Which for many years for me stood for focus, intention, tenacity. About 6 months ago, just doing some reflective work, I said, Shawn, you need to let go of all this tenacity of striving to doing and performing. Let go of the tenacity and receive trust, right? And so fit is still fit, but it's not focus, intention, and tenacity. It is focus, intention, and trust. And I look forward to getting fit with all three of you, right? There's a lot of follow-up that I got that's clicking right here, right? And so thank you, Stephen, for pushing that back. As we close, I'm going to ask you guys to do a quick chat back. Whoever is still on with us, put in your inspiration, your words, your insights as we are closing out in the chat. And thank you both for joining us for the Willionaire Wednesday takeover. And I'm assuming until you say don't come back, Stephen, until you say don't come back, I'm assuming that I will see you next Wednesday. Until you prune me, I'll see you next week.
All right, guys. Have a great week.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Thanks so much for allowing me to be here.